What happens when a bus driver becomes the president of a nation sitting on the world's largest oil reserves? What happens when hope turns into crisis, and democracy collides with authoritarian power? Today, on CTN News Global, we dive into the extraordinary and controversial story of Nicolás Maduro, the man who inherited Hugo Chávez's revolution and led Venezuela into one of the most turbulent chapters in modern history. Stay tuned, because this isn't just politics, it's a global drama unfolding before our eyes. From bus driver to president. The unlikely rise. Nicolás Maduro's story begins far from the presidential palace. Born in Caracas in 1962, he grew up in a modest household, surrounded by the everyday struggles of Venezuela's working class. Unlike many political leaders who emerge from elite universities or military backgrounds, Maduro's path was unconventional. He worked as a bus driver for the Caracas metro system, a job that placed him at the heart of the city's bustling streets and gave him direct exposure to the frustrations of ordinary Venezuelans. It was here, behind the wheel of a bus, that Maduro began organizing fellow workers. His union activism gave him a reputation as a defender of labor rights and a voice for the underrepresented. This grassroots credibility would later become a cornerstone of his political identity. He wasn't seen as a polished politician but rather as someone who understood the struggles of everyday citizens. Maduro's loyalty to Hugo Chávez proved decisive. When Chávez launched the Bolivarian Revolution in the late 1990s, Maduro quickly aligned himself with the movement. He rose through the ranks of the newly formed United Socialist Party of Venezuela, PSUV, serving first as a legislator in the National Assembly, then as its president. His ability to navigate party politics while maintaining his image as a man of the people made him a trusted ally of Chávez. By 2006, Maduro was appointed foreign minister, representing Venezuela on the global stage. Despite lacking formal higher education, he proved adept at diplomacy, forging ties with countries like Russia, China, and Iran. In 2012, Chávez named him vice president, signaling to the nation that Maduro was his chosen successor. When Chávez died in March 2013, Maduro stepped forward as the heir to the revolution. His rise from bus driver to president was not just improbable, it was symbolic. To supporters, he embodied the idea that anyone from humble beginnings could lead a nation. To critics, however, his lack of formal training foreshadowed the challenges Venezuela would soon face under his leadership. The 2013 election, a nation divided. When Hugo Chávez passed away in March 2013, Venezuela was plunged into uncertainty. For over a decade, Chávez had been the face of the Bolivarian Revolution, a charismatic leader who commanded loyalty from millions. His death left a vacuum, and Nicolás Maduro, his chosen successor, stepped forward to claim the mantle. But the transition was anything but smooth. The presidential election held in April 2013 became one of the most contentious in Venezuela's modern history. Maduro faced opposition candidate Enrique Capriles, a youthful, energetic figure who promised to steer Venezuela away from Chávez's socialist experiment. The campaign was fierce, emotional, and deeply polarized. On one side stood Maduro, presenting himself as the guardian of Chávez's legacy. On the other stood Capriles, appealing to Venezuelans weary of economic mismanagement and political repression. When the votes were counted, Maduro was declared the winner, but by the slimmest of margins, less than 2 percentage points. The opposition cried foul, alleging irregularities and demanding a recount. Protests erupted across the country, with clashes between demonstrators and security forces leaving several dead. For many Venezuelans, the election symbolized a nation split in two, one half clinging to the revolutionary dream, the other desperate for change. Maduro's victory was not just about numbers, it was about legitimacy. Unlike Chávez, who had won elections with overwhelming support, Maduro entered office under a cloud of suspicion. His narrow win weakened his mandate from the very beginning, forcing him to rely heavily on the military and loyal institutions to consolidate power. This fragile start set the tone for the years to come. Venezuela was no longer united under a charismatic leader, it was fractured, distrustful, and bracing for conflict. The 2013 election wasn't just a contest of votes, it was the opening act of a political drama that would define the nation's future. With a divided nation and a shaky mandate, How would Maduro prove himself as Chávez's heir? The answer would unfold in Venezuela's economy, and it would shock the world. Economic collapse, from oil wealth to hyperinflation. For decades, Venezuela was known as the land of oil wealth. With the largest proven reserves in the world, the nation once enjoyed prosperity, funded by petroleum exports that fueled social programs and lifted millions out of poverty under Hugo Chávez. But when Nicolás Maduro took office in 2013, the cracks in this system began to widen, and soon, the entire economic foundation collapsed. Oil prices fell sharply in 2014, slashing Venezuela's revenue. Instead of diversifying the economy, Maduro doubled down on Chávez's model, relying almost entirely on oil exports. Mismanagement, corruption, and declining production at the state oil company PDVSA compounded the crisis. By 2016, Venezuela was spiraling into one of the worst economic meltdowns in modern history. Hyperinflation became the defining feature of daily life. Prices skyrocketed so fast that salaries lost value within hours. At its peak, inflation reached millions of %, rendering the Venezuelan bolivar practically worthless. Citizens carried stacks of cash just to buy bread, and eventually, many turned to US dollars or even bartering to survive. The collapse wasn't just about numbers, it was about human suffering. Supermarket shelves emptied, hospitals ran out of medicine, and electricity blackouts became routine. Families skipped meals, children suffered from malnutrition, and millions of Venezuelans fled across borders in search of stability. The migration crisis reshaped Latin America, as neighboring countries struggled to absorb the influx. Maduro's government blamed foreign sanctions and economic warfare for the crisis, while critics pointed to corruption, failed policies, and authoritarian control. Regardless of the cause, the result was undeniable. Venezuela, once a symbol of oil wealth, had become a cautionary tale of economic collapse. But as the economy crumbled, Maduro's grip on power only tightened. How did he maintain control in the face of chaos? Authoritarian grip, power at all costs. By 2014, Venezuela's economy was unraveling, protests were spreading, and Nicolás Maduro's fragile mandate from the 2013 election was under constant attack. Yet instead of loosening his grip, Maduro tightened it. What followed was a systematic consolidation of power that transformed Venezuela into one of the most polarized and authoritarian states in the Western Hemisphere. Maduro understood that his survival depended on control. He leaned heavily on the military, granting generals lucrative positions in government and the oil industry. In return, the armed forces became his shield against uprisings. The judiciary, too, was brought under his influence. Courts routinely sided with the government, disqualifying opposition candidates and silencing dissent. In 2017, Maduro bypassed the opposition-controlled National Assembly by creating a new Constituent Assembly pact with loyalists. This move effectively stripped the opposition of legislative power, cementing his dominance. Critics called it a coup against democracy, while Maduro framed it as a necessary step to protect the revolution. The 2018 presidential election became the ultimate test. With major opposition parties banned or boycotting, Maduro claimed victory in a vote widely condemned as fraudulent. International observers, including the United States and the European Union, refused to recognize the results. Yet Maduro pressed forward, declaring himself the legitimate leader and branding opponents as traitors. Protests erupted across Venezuela, met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and arrests. Opposition leader Juan Guaido's declaration as interim president in 2019 briefly shook Maduro's hold, but the military remained loyal, and foreign allies like Russia and China provided crucial support. Maduro's authoritarian grip was not just about silencing rivals, it was about survival. He built a fortress of power around himself, using institutions, propaganda, and force to withstand economic collapse and political isolation. But while Maduro clung to power, the world was watching. His enemies and allies turned Venezuela into a battlefield of global politics. International chessboard, allies and enemies. As Venezuela's economy collapsed and protests intensified, Nicolás Maduro's survival increasingly depended not just on domestic power but on the global chessboard. His presidency became a test of international alliances, with Venezuela positioned at the center of a geopolitical tug-of-war. On one side stood Maduro's enemies. The United States, the European Union, and many Latin American nations condemned his 2018 re-election as fraudulent. Sanctions were imposed on Venezuela's oil industry, financial institutions, and even Maduro's inner circle. Washington froze assets, restricted trade, and recognized opposition leader Juan Guaidó as interim president. For Maduro, these moves were framed as imperialist aggression, but in reality, they deepened Venezuela's isolation and worsened the economic crisis. Yet Maduro was not without powerful allies. Russia stepped in with loans, military advisors, and oil deals, ensuring Venezuela could bypass Western sanctions. China provided billions in credit and infrastructure projects, securing long-term access to Venezuela's resources. Iran and Turkey also offered support, trading goods and strengthening diplomatic ties. These alliances allowed Maduro to portray himself as a defender of sovereignty against Western interference, even as his people suffered. This global divide turned Venezuela into a symbolic battlefield. To the west, Maduro represented authoritarianism and failed socialism. To his allies, he was a bulwark against U.S. dominance. The result was a stalemate. Sanctions squeezed Venezuela, but foreign backing kept Maduro afloat. The international chessboard wasn't just about politics, it was about survival. Without Russia, China, and Iran, Maduro's regime might have collapsed under economic pressure. With them, he endured, defying expectations and prolonging his rule. But while Maduro played the global game, ordinary Venezuelans paid the price. Millions fled their homeland, creating one of the largest migration crises in modern history. The human cost, Venezuela's migration crisis. Behind the headlines of disputed elections and international sanctions lies the most devastating consequence of Nicolás Maduro's rule, the human cost. Venezuela's collapse didn't just destroy an economy, it uprooted millions of lives, creating one of the largest migration crises in modern history. By the late 2010s, food shortages, hyperinflation, and failing healthcare systems forced ordinary Venezuelans to make impossible choices. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Doctors worked without medicine. Families sold possessions just to afford bus tickets out of the country. What began as a trickle of migration soon became a flood. Today, more than 7 million Venezuelans have fled their homeland, scattering across Latin America and beyond. Colombia absorbed the largest share, opening its borders to millions of refugees. Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, and Chile also struggled to accommodate the influx, stretching their resources and sparking political debates about immigration. For many Venezuelans, the journey was perilous, walking for days across mountains, sleeping in makeshift camps, and facing discrimination in foreign lands. The crisis reshaped Venezuela's identity. Skilled professionals, teachers, doctors, engineers left in droves, creating a brain drain that crippled the nation's future. Families were torn apart, with loved ones separated across continents. Those who stayed behind endured hunger, blackouts, and insecurity, clinging to hope that change might one day come. Maduro's government often dismissed the migration as exaggerated, blaming foreign propaganda. But the images told another story: endless lines of people crossing borders, children clutching their parents' hands, and communities struggling to rebuild their lives far from home. This human tragedy became the most powerful indictment of Maduro's rule. It wasn't just about politics, it was about survival. But even as millions fled, Maduro sought to rally the nation with a bold gamble, claiming territory beyond Venezuela's borders. The Essequibo gamble, nationalism as survival. By 2023, Nicolás Maduro faced mounting pressure at home and abroad. The economy was in ruins, millions had fled, and his legitimacy was questioned by much of the international community. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, Maduro turned to a powerful political weapon: nationalism. His target was the Essequibo region, a vast, resource-rich territory claimed by neighboring Guyana. The Essequibo dispute is not new, it dates back to the 19th century, when colonial powers drew contested borders. For decades, Venezuela maintained its claim, but the issue remained largely dormant. Maduro revived it, framing the struggle as a patriotic cause. In December 2023, his government held a controversial referendum, asking Venezuelans whether they supported asserting sovereignty over Essequibo. The vote passed overwhelmingly, though critics argued it was manipulated to rally support for Maduro's embattled regime. Why Essequibo? The region is rich in oil and minerals, and Guyana's recent discovery of massive offshore oil reserves made it strategically valuable. By reigniting the dispute, Maduro sought to distract from Venezuela's domestic crisis and unite citizens under a banner of national pride. For many Venezuelans, the referendum was less about territory and more about identity, a chance to reclaim dignity in the face of hardship. International reaction was swift. Guyana condemned the move, calling it a violation of sovereignty. The United States and regional allies warned against escalation, while Maduro insisted Venezuela was simply defending its historic rights. Analysts saw the referendum as a calculated gamble, a way for Maduro to shore up support at home by positioning himself as a defender of the nation, even as his government struggled to provide food, jobs, and stability. The Essequibo gamble revealed Maduro's survival strategy. When cornered by economic collapse and political isolation, he turned to nationalism, betting that patriotic fervor could buy him time. But even nationalism couldn't shield Maduro forever. The fall, 2026 capture. For more than a decade, Nicolás Maduro defied expectations. He survived economic collapse, mass protests, international sanctions, and even an attempted uprising. He leaned on allies like Russia and China, fortified his grip on the military, and wielded nationalism to rally support. But in January 2026, the chapter that began with a bus driver rising to power came to a stunning and dramatic end. Reports emerged of a U.S. military operation that captured Maduro, marking one of the most extraordinary turns in Venezuela's modern history. For years, Washington had sought to remove him, branding him a dictator responsible for human rights abuses and economic devastation. Yet few believed such a direct intervention would ever succeed. When it did, the shockwaves reverberated across Latin America and beyond. Inside Venezuela, reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the fall of a leader they saw as the architect of their suffering. Others, loyal to the Bolivarian Revolution, condemned the capture as foreign aggression. The military, long Maduro's backbone, faced a moment of reckoning. Would they resist, or accept the new reality? Globally, the event reshaped geopolitics. Russia and China denounced the operation, warning of destabilization. The United States hailed it as a victory for democracy. Neighboring countries braced for uncertainty, knowing Venezuela's future was now wide open. For Venezuelans, Maduro's capture symbolized both an end and a beginning. The man who once promised to carry Chávez's torch had been removed, leaving behind a nation scarred by crisis but yearning for renewal. The fall of Maduro was not just the collapse of a presidency, it was the closing act of an era defined by resilience, controversy, and survival against all odds. Maduro's journey from bus driver to embattled president is more than a Venezuelan story, it's a global lesson in power, resilience, and the cost of failed leadership. What do you think? Was Maduro a defender of sovereignty or a dictator clinging to power? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters in shaping the global conversation. And if you found this deep dive eye-opening, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to CTN News Global for more stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines. Together, we'll keep the world informed.